We are here today with Joe McMenamin, who is seeking re-election to the Ward 7 seat on the Springfield City Council in the April 2nd election. We appreciate you being with us and invite you to start with an opening statement about who you are and why you're seeking another term in office.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here at the SJR Editorial Board. Thank you for the invitation. I'm in my 8th year of service on the City Council. I also represent the city on the Regional Planning Commission, the Sangamon County Regional Planning Commission. I've lived on the west side 40 years, married, 2 grown children, 40 years of legal practice, 30 years Illinois Army National Guard. It's been an honor to serve on the City Council and to represent the constituents of Ward 7. I bring an independent view to the City Council, bring checks and balances, bring a very careful fiscal analysis to all our issues, and look forward to serving another 4 years.
Okay. What would you say has been the most challenging part about being an alderman?
I would say overall, the fiscal issues. I voted no on 7 consecutive budgets for the reason that they are basically bringing the city into greater and greater debt. It's like taking on more and more mortgage every year. When I came into office 8 years ago, the liability we owed the police and fire pension funds was $115 million. Today it's approaching $315 million.
That's so combined, correct?
That's combined,
okay.
Police and fire together, and it does not include IMRF. So we've got a growing budget imbalance. Basically, we leave the pension obligation unpaid to pay for current operations. And so whenever you increase your mortgage year after year after year, your principal and interest increases, and that's exactly what's happened with our city budget over the last 24 years. We've got a 24-year trend of going deeper and deeper into the hole, and so whereas 24 years ago, about 1/3 of our real estate taxes went to pensions, now all of our real estate taxes went to pensions, and it's just going to get worse until we bite the bullet and try to reverse the trend. So that's why I introduced an ordinance under the City Council this past week that would obligate the city to more fully fund our police and fire pension funds. And to be honest, I think I'm hopeful the council will pass it, but I think it may be doubtful because the temptation to just kick the can down the road is too great.
I was going to ask about pensions later, but why don't you tell us more about how the city could accomplish that under your ordinance?
Well, we just have to face the music and face the medicine. And I was very enthused by the latest fire contract with our firefighters, which they basically in that contract accomplished 2 goals, long-term goals I've had for during my time on the council. They agreed to a residency for new hires, which is extremely important to our local economy because it just recirculates. It's like a buy local concept. If we have high-income households within our city, that's more money generating through our local economy. So that was one positive of the fire contract, and they were historically the most resistant to residency, and during the Mayor Hesera time caused the city, as the leaders of that effort, to abandon our residency requirement, which we had back then. But the second feature of the fire contract, which is extraordinarily important and which really demonstrated the leadership of our firefighters as first responders, not only for fires but also for the fiscal situation we have in the city. They agreed basically to a 1-year freeze. They took a bonus in lieu of an increase to their base pay. So what that does is every subsequent year, their base pay is going to be less than it would otherwise have been. So we get perpetual savings, and I think you've commented upon that in your editorial page. And so it's not only a savings every operational year, but then at the retirement, their pensionable income is less than it would have otherwise been had there not been a freeze. And so then we have savings on the pension side as well. So I'm hoping that the police duplicate their contract. Their contract is also expired, just like the fire contract was expired 3 years. police is now expired, I believe, 2 years, and I hope the police duplicate it, and then every other 20-plus collective bargaining agreements adopts a similar plan. I think that's how we begin the turnaround. And so in combination, if our employees are willing to contribute to the fiscal problem solving that we have, then I, as an alderman, I'll do my best to find the money to take care of not only our current services, but to the pension obligation. So I would be willing to say yes to tax increases if we get contribution from our employees. And I think our leaders who deny the importance of paying our debts as they come due are not fit for office. We've seen what's happened at the state of Illinois when that pattern continues, and we have to break that pattern, and it will take some courage and leadership, and I'm prepared to provide it. So, sorry for the long answer.
For our readers who might not be familiar with the ordinance you introduced to more fully fund, can you walk us through briefly how that would work?
Sure. Historically, what's happened is that in calculating how much the city should contribute to the pension, we look at, well, how much will the monies that have been set aside, how much will they earn on their own? And historically, for 24 years, we have unreasonably expected our set-aside funds to earn more than what they actually do run. It's a 24-year pattern. Every year, we assume that our invested funds will do better than what they actually do. So for the last 10 years, through last year, our actual rate of return was 5.5%. This year, because 2008 is now out of the 10-year span, which was a very down year for the equity markets, the 10-year annualized performance of our investment funds is 6.4%. So my ordinance recommends that we prepare for a more realistic rate of return expectation. So as we're going into this budget, we're expecting our investment funds to earn 7%. So I recommend that next year we reset that expectation to 6.7%, and then the year after that to 6.4%, which would match what our actual annualized rate of return has been for the last 10 years, which now excludes 2008. And by doing so, our obligation to the pension funds increases by roughly $1.7 million a year from now, and goes to $3.7 million the year after that, greater than what it would otherwise be. But the point is, we're more fully funding our pensions so that this problem we have now won't continue forever. The more we ignore this problem, the more severe the problem becomes down the road. So that explains the ordinance that was introduced. Basically, it's an ordinance that realistically looks at what we will get from our invested funds and then requires the employer to contribute accordingly.
So are there structural changes that the legislature could or should initiate to help resolve some of these pension issues?
Absolutely, and the legislature can help also, and we hope they do. But we can't continue to expect the solution to come from outside of ourselves. We have to contribute to the solution also.
Right.
And most of the General Assembly solutions are kind of kick the can down solutions typically anyways. So,
right. There's been talk of consolidating some of those funds from the 650 or so police and fire funds to one. Your thoughts about that, Joe?
I think for the smaller pension funds in particular, the smaller fire districts and police districts, that's a really good idea. And there's really some advantages to Springfield in terms of reduced administrative costs. The goal, though, is to properly fund the pension funds. Currently, there's also talk about, currently we're allowed to invest no more than 65% in equities, and some suggest let's go more equity investment because that will improve our rate of return. But really, you do want a mixture of both fixed income and equity because that keeps the swings from being too great from one year to the other. You wouldn't want to move into equities last year, for example, when we had a 20% down market by the end of December for the year. And by the way, our rate of return last year for our invested funds was -4, but we projected at the start of the year that we'd earn 7%. So, so that's a swing of 11%. So you can see how things can go badly.
Well, I didn't mean to get into pensions so fast, but so going back a little bit, what do you see are the most pressing issues facing Ward 7, and how would you work to address them?
Well, definitely it would be infrastructure in terms of MacArthur Boulevard and in terms of Chatham Road. Those are the two most frequent comments I receive from constituents, that MacArthur Boulevard is atrocious. It's in need of significant repair and beautification, and we're hoping that our new governor gets to a capital plan, and we are able, as a capital city, to capture a significant amount of that money. I know there's other goals out there like Interstate 55 and the Y Block funding and other kinds of competing goals out there for any capital plan that would come to the city, but clearly when you look at the rooftops, there's no higher concentration of population than along MacArthur Boulevard, the old MacArthur Boulevard. So I hope we're at the top of the list. And then the other one is Chatham Road, and that's a concrete road that's we were supposed to seal it properly last fall, but because of delays by our city council in approving a contract that our Public Works Department had negotiated, all the sealing did not take place. And if you go down Chatham Road, you see just gaping potholes that would not have been there had we properly sealed the road. And that gets to the issue of undue influence on the city council. That contract with the Joliet contractor, who's a union contractor, was delayed because one of our local union halls wanted 5 employees on that job to come out of his union hall. And the city council members, I think, over-obliged and delayed that contract. Ultimately, they approved it, but by that time, we were so late into the fall that we never got all the work completed. So Chatham Road is also complicated by the fact that we have 1 mile of it owned by Leland Grove, but we had last fall a intergovernmental agreement with Leland Grove so that had we approved that patching contract, the city would have done the work, and then Leland Grove would have reimbursed us. But we never got all of that work completed, again, because the bad weather came, just like our city engineers advised our city council that that would happen, and then we'd face even greater maintenance costs because the thawing and unthawing of the cracks in the concrete causes breakups, and it's expensive to repair, and that's what we're now facing. So those would be the two most important, I think, issues at the Ward 7 level. At the city level, I would say it's the fiscal issues, and we've got 40% of our neighborhoods are either beyond the tipping point or at the tipping point. They need reinvestment, and I hope we can get it to our neighborhoods. By reinvestment, I mean in the old neighborhoods, we have lots of concerns about sewers and pipes going into the homes, and those sewers and pipes break. And then the way things typically are, the laterals are completely the obligation of the homeowner, and there's no city contribution. We did pass, at my sponsorship, a ordinance 5 years ago that when there's sewer backups in basements, the city would provide up to $3,500 to upgrade the plumbing in the basements of homes, in older homes. And that program was highly successful. I'd like to have a comparative program for the water coming into the homes, the laterals going out to the mains, and the sewers leaving the homes, so that there's less concern when you purchase the older homes. And those that live in the older homes already have got the money to fix the problems that develop in older homes. So that'd be one way to reinvest in our older neighborhoods, which I strongly support. And how do we pay for it? At the ICON meeting, the Inner City Older Neighborhood meeting, I suggested that we double the fees and the sticker on the video gaming machines. We've got huge profits being made off those gaming machines, and the city's only getting a small slice of those profits. We can't touch the percentage distribution from video gaming because it's set by state law. As far as the percentage of the net profits, percentage goes to the state, percentage goes to the municipality, a very small slice, percentage to the machine owners, and a slice to the establishments. But we do have the authority to set the sticker price that is applied to those machines annually, and the permit that allows the establishment to have those machines. Much of the profits are leaving our community because the owners of the machines typically are out of state, and many of the establishment owners, like for example Lucy's Places and some of those early on video gaming establishments are owned by parties outside the city. So that's one area where we could get some monies for our investment in older neighborhoods, and that it would be consistent with the original plan with the video gaming money that we put it into infrastructure, which is what we're doing now.
Given how many video gaming we have here in Springfield, because I believe we have more than anywhere in the state.
Higher concentration.
Yeah. Do you have any estimates of how much money that could raise if you did increase those fees?
It would be in the $200,000 to $300,000 range.
A year?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's enough to finance quite a few applications. Let's say if we a lateral repair, a pipe going out to the main, it's typically $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. So this would finance up to 100 homeowners a year.
Okay. We'd argue that homelessness is another issue facing the city. How can council work to address that?
I think we're doing a lot with the winter homeless shelter, and we've put resources into that. I think we should get help from Capital Township because Capital Township is there to service the needy, and clearly homeless folks are needy. So that would be the two, that we need more help from Capital Township funds.
All right, I was going to ask you about that later, but since you brought up the township, do you think it should be merged, and if so, with the city or the county?
I do think it should be merged, and I think the city is the best destination. Why? Because those are city taxes, providing city services, and therefore city representatives should be making those decisions, and not representatives from Williamsville, Chatham, Rochester, or Pleasant Plains, etc. It should be local representation.
Okay. Another issue we as an edit board have argued about is the need for more economic development here in Springfield. There's been a couple projects the past few years that we as an edit board argue would have been good for the city, such as the architecture firm that wanted to build at the old marina site, the Ferguson Booth building. Council, of course, voted those down, so we're asking incumbents to remind us what their votes were on that and then explain why they voted the way you did on those two projects.
Well, the architecture out at the lake, there was just the local folks there were strongly opposed, and there was also questions about the owner or the business owner out there, his background and such. On the Monroe Street 3 buildings, I was strongly in favor of that and would continue to resurrect that. Conversion of downtown buildings is extraordinarily expensive, and we need to acknowledge that. What was the third item?
Those were the two.
Okay. But generally, my thoughts on economic development are government should provide public safety, effective public safety, and outstanding infrastructure and schooling, education, not just at the primary levels, but all the way up through university. And we've got outstanding university resources. They're here already. And we have good public safety, and infrastructure, we need to make improvements. But once we have those three elements in place, then government should just get out of the way. And if we have attractive places to live and beautiful places to live and safety, then economic development happens on its own. The government doesn't really have to get in the middle of that. It'll happen on its own. So that's kind of my philosophy on that. And so I would, instead of putting $250,000 into the Lincoln Economic Development Corporation, I'd put that money into beautifying our gateways into the city. make a statement that we are proud of Springfield and we believe in beauty and attractiveness, and I think that's a better commitment of money. I hope that Land and Lincoln Economic Development Corporation is successful, but I think direct investment in our own city is a better way to go. And I also thought that the funding of that was odd, because on the one hand, the county, okay, it's private money, and then a bunch of county money, and then city money. How about all those other municipalities throughout the county? Where's the money from Chatham? Where's the money from Rochester? Where's the money from Pleasant Plains for that Economic Development Corporation? Why? We've got our own challenges here at the city of Springfield, our financial challenges. Why are we considered the big pocket where people come to us for money? For economic activity, we're the big giant in the room, Springfield. I just thought it was misplaced priority to hand over that economic development to the county people.
How do you think the EDC is doing so far?
I think it's too early to judge. I don't see, they've got good goals and plans, but I don't know much beyond that.
Okay.
Talking finances of the city keeps coming up. They've been tough the last couple of years for the city, and the council did approve tax increases the last couple of years: the sales tax, the telecom tax, hotel motel. We're asking incumbents to explain how they voted on those and why they did so.
I voted yes on the hotel motel, and I think I actually was one of the early ones to promote it for the cemetery. It's dedicated to the cemetery. And then the telecommunications tax is dedicated to the library. I was also a yes vote on that, and strongly urged it. On the sales tax, I think I would have preferred a different source of revenue than the sales tax. I was a proponent of the municipal natural gas tax, to put Ameren on the same level of taxation as our own utility. And also, I thought the increase of our local sales tax is extraordinarily damaging to our local economy. We're now, especially now, we have a 1% rise due to the county sales tax. We're now close to 10%, and I think people say, let me find a way to buy that $1,000 item or $10,000 item outside of Illinois or through other means of Springfield. So I think we damage our local economy when we keep increasing our local sales tax. And I also think it was highly dangerous for the school districts to basically take away the traditional source of revenue that the city has. So now we're in a kind of a bind, because like we were saying before, we have those pension obligations out there, and we will be raising taxes. We can dream we won't, but we will have to, or cut services dramatically.
You've said you voted no on the last 7 consecutive budgets. Your 8th one's coming up here soon. How do you think you'll vote this year?
Well, if the 2 pension ordinances, one by Mayor Langfelder and mine, were to pass, I think, in combination with the fire collective bargaining agreement that we talked about earlier, then I was prepared to vote yes, because I think we're kind of making the strategic long-term decisions that would allow a yes vote. I would like to see what happens to the 2 pension ordinances next week, and then I'll vote accordingly. I think the mayor has a good proposal, because he's providing a potential source of revenue to more fully fund the pension. So our 2 ordinances are kind of complementary, even though we are both kind of working on independent tracks, and it just so happened that we offered our ordinances at the same time, as it turned out.
Okay. What do you see as the most pressing issues facing CWLP, and how should they be handled?
Well, hugely, it's the two huge issues. One is whether we build a second lake, and I wish I'd brought my chart in for that. Basically, on the lake issue, the most 5 recent years, we're actually seeing a decline in our water usage per household and aggregate. And in the 35 prior years to that, it was flat. The usage was flat. If you go back 40 years, the projection was that our water usage would double, and it never happened. So 40 years ago, our leaders properly had a concern about where will we get our water if our usage doubled. But then it never happened. So we've got to readjust our thinking on that. But our thinking also has to take into consideration that when we retire the two oldest coal-fired power plants, that will mean a reduction of 25% of our water usage. So we've got that fact to consider. And then on top of all that, we have a growing sediment problem in the bottom of our lake that needs to be dredged out. That's a maintenance obligation that we have to our first lake. The runoff from the farms is creating a lot of phosphorus and other chemicals at the bottom of the lake. And if you get too much concentration of those chemicals, you can end up with a dangerous water problem. So I originally, 8 years ago, I was in favor of the second lake, but after having studied it, I think there's other ways to address our water needs. And then the other major challenge on our utility is what will be the sources of generation going forward. We've relied on coal-fired and then those wind contracts that turned out to be financially inflexible and very expensive to the city. So we've got this integrated resource plan now underway where we'll get some advice on what our future sources of energy will come from, and we'll wait for that advice from our advisors.
That's coming in April, correct?
We hope, yes.
Okay. I feel an issue that's been talked about a lot around the horseshoe the last year is tourism. Do you think Springfield is leveraging its attractions in the best manner it could, and what could we be doing better?
We have huge assets to leverage, and I think we've got a very positive, energetic new director of tourism, Scott Dahl, and he's got some targets, and he's going to fill up our motel and hotel rooms, and he's going to get it from, I think we're at average occupancy levels is something like, he's going to bring it up by 10%. Wherever it's at now, he'll bring it up, and that's not only good for our local economy, but it increases our hotel-motel tax, which we can put back into tourism. So I think the leadership of our tourism offices is real important, and I think we can expect real good outcomes from his leadership.
What do you think should go on the Y block?
I think we should do another request for proposals and see what money is out there to invest in the block. I think the university idea is a good one, although that doesn't produce taxable real estate, and then it creates a new building and doesn't convert all the old stock that we already have downtown that needs conversion and usage. So there's pluses and minuses to everything, but I think another round of requests for proposals would help us see what's out there.
Would it be for a specific thing, or would you leave it open-ended to hey, just basically invite people to say what they think could go there, or?
Absolutely.
Okay, because the others have been very specific. We want mixed use with this, and this.
Open-ended.
Okay.
See what's available. And I thought the park idea was really a fallback position by the mayor until some big money would come along. I don't think it was intended that it would have to be a permanent park, and that was all private money that was coming in. So I think the mayor had some bad luck on that proposal. I think some powerful interests lined up against him, including Brad Shivey, the laborers, and it kind of upset the idea from early in the process.
So governing magazines come out with articles about the racial divide in some Midwest cities, and Springfield was prominently featured. Did you get a chance to take a look at that?
I did. I think it's more of an income divide currently than it is a racial divide. In Ward 7, I think we're about 15% minority, or by maybe 18, 19% if we include Indians from India and Pakistan and those of other descents. If you go back 50 years ago, Ward 7 would have been 3% minority population. So we really have much better integration throughout the city now. But the trend of high income versus low income, that's a national trend. The wealth gap is extraordinarily an extraordinarily significant problem nationwide, and it's here in Springfield. And you're right that the economic gap is really bad on the east of, well, it's always changing, but I don't know how to best address that except to, again, infrastructure, beautification, attractive gateways, and then hopefully that spreads.
So those would be suggestions, or you think there are city policies or ordinances that stand in the way of that now, or things that you'd want to take a closer look at?
Absolutely. I'd want to beautify the linear stretch of South Grand, Cook, Clear Lake. Once you have a beautiful front door, you kind of take more pride in what's inside. I'm surprised that those gateways haven't been improved better. I think linear parks on those gateways would be a good idea, and start encouraging investment in those parts of town by the city really improving the infrastructure further, buying up those lots along those linear parks. In Peoria, they have a linear park close to Butler University, and it's been helpful there to maintain the housing stock and get reinvestment.
So with the rail relocation, kind of down this 10th, 11th Street corridor, will that have an impact on this kind of perceived divide between the east side and the west side?
Well, I don't know. Hopefully it won't. We've got the transportation hub that will maybe attract folks who want to live close to where they can jump on a bus, and that will be along the 11th Street. I just don't know, John, if that'll make the problem worse or better.
Yeah.
I think it'll improve downtown if we get the trains off 2nd Street. It'll make downtown more attractive, and maybe then that prosperity or improvement will spread in every direction, including towards the east and the north and the south, and really all the areas around. There's a ring of tipping point neighborhoods around the downtown.
You in the past have brought up campaign contributions that are made to council members. Can you share with us kind of what your philosophy is and who you accept contributions from?
I don't take any monies from those that bring ordinances to the city council for approval, whether it be an architectural firm, engineering firm, law firm, unions. I think that's the better policy. I think we've had a real problem in Springfield with money passing around. I think that Saputo's meeting in the fall of 2017 was a very good example. But I've gone back and looked at the campaign finance reports of all the aldermen that were participated in that Saputo's meeting, and about $40,000, over $40,000 was passed around in the course of that week. And most of that money was coming either from a few unions or from developers. And some of those individuals had ordinances pending before the city council at that time, or had recently had ordinances successfully passed. And again, we are a year and a half before the next election, and I think it sends a wrong signal to everyone in Springfield that somehow you got to pay money to our city council if you want to get favorable consideration for an ordinance. I think it's really a serious problem in Springfield. I think there's one union in particular, the laborers, that passes around more money than any other giver of money in Sangamon County, and the money goes to each party and just about every elected official, typically, certainly at the city council. I was surprised when I came on the city council. The first collective bargaining agreement to be approved by the city council in 2011 was with the operating engineers, And I thought I wanted to discuss that first collective bargaining agreement as a new attorney, because the first agreement typically sets a standard or for all that follow. But there was a rush to approve it. And I scratched I said, why is there a rush to approve this? Let's really think this one through. Because we got a new administration, a new mayor, and we had, I think at that time, 7 new aldermen or thereabouts. And then I decided to look at the campaign contributions, and every alderman, all 9 aldermen, had received either $500 or $1,000 from that union in the months preceding the vote. And I just thought, whoa, I was disturbed by that. I was disturbed by that.
Campaign contributions aren't illegal, though. I mean, these are perfectly legal contributions that they have made. Is it more of an ethical thing you're saying then than a?
It's a bias and an influence thing. Okay. I think the money influences the aldermen, and aldermen that deny that are just fooling themselves. I think that contract on Chatham Road I talked about before is a good example of it. I've studied the other city councils in Peoria, Joliet, Decatur, Champaign, and the kind of money that we see moving around this city council doesn't move around in those other cities. Many of the aldermen don't even establish a finance campaign account because they don't take in more than $5,000 in any one year. And most of my money comes from Ward 7 residents, and it's typically $50, $100 at a time. And when I had my first fundraiser in 3.5 years last fall, I wrote 220 thank yous because it was truly a grassroots effort, and I really appreciated Ward 7 constituents offering to help me in my campaign and asking for nothing in return except careful consideration of the issues and diligent performance of duties.
We appreciate you meeting with us today, Joe, and invite you to give a brief closing statement as to why voters should choose you on Election Day.
Well, I think constituent services is what I've really worked hard at, answering those phone calls and so forth. I think the residency ordinances, which was achieved through cooperation, is significant. I think the redevelopment of Hy-Vee is a major, major accomplishment. The renewal of MacArthur Park Apartments, extraordinarily important. I think focus on the financial issues is important for our long-term prosperity of our city. And I really appreciate being here today, and thank you for allowing this opportunity.